This is Circular Shooter Period 2, Part 3. Right now I'll give you a preview of what the game is doing. So the character is moving around. We have a little health marker up in the top corner. And some of our enemies wiggle up and down. And some of our enemies wiggle left and right. Right now I don't know what's going to happen if we get to 0 health. So we'll try that in just a moment. 0 health, everything kind of stops and freezes. So we've got that going for us. We need to get a little bit more going on than everything just stopping and freezing. So let's bring up what we're going to do to create a game over window. So to start at this point, I'm going to go to layers, and I'm going to make a new layer. And I'm going to rename it to HUD for Heads Up Display. So it's going to be our pop-up window. Maybe we'll move score objects onto there so that it's always on top of things and there. So we're making a new layer called HUD. And on that layer, I'm going to add a new sprite called HUD Background. And I'm going to resize it by clicking the resize icon up here. And I'm going to say I want it to be 600 by 250. So it's going to be wider than it is tall. And I'm going to give it the off black color of 50-50-50. So this is going to be the window that pops up that says game over, that's got the button to restart the game, that's got the button to go back to the home screen. Okay? So a good name for this would be HUD Background. So we'll rename it there. And then the only other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to adjust its position so it's exactly 427 pixels in the X direction, because that way we know it's put right in the right spot of the screen. So it's right in the middle. I don't care about where the height is for right now. You can tweak the height later. Just make sure it's in the middle. From there, I want to clone my text score object, because I just want to get a quick text thing that's going to match, that's going to say game over. So I'm going to right click on this, choose clone object type, click on the HUD background, and now I've got another message. It's called text score 2. This one I'm going to call and change to text message, and I'm going to give it a starting text of game over. Now watch what happens when I hit enter. If my text score wasn't big enough, I could only see the word game. That's a possibility. So if you don't see the full message, make the text box bigger so you can see the full message that you're putting in there. Same thing, I'm going to adjust this X position to be 427 pixels so that the text is centered over the HUD background. And I'm okay with it being pushed up a little bit like that. Everybody good so far? All right. Next, I'm going to add in 2 buttons that are going to be underneath the lower left and lower right-hand side, right about here and here. So double-click, insert a new sprite object on the HUD. I'm going to resize it to be 80 pixels tall, so 250 pixels width, 80 pixels height, and I'm going to give it the white background, the off-white 250, 250, 250. Okay? I'll rename this sprite to BTN Home, that's short for button home. And then I'm going to move it to be somewhere in the lower corner of this page. I'm not going to count out pixels exactly. I'm just going to say wherever it is looks okay, as long as the one next to it matches in height. So to make the one next to it, I'm just going to right click again and clone object type and click to place a new one. Instead of button home 2, we'll call this one BTN again. And I'll match the Y. So the Y here is 223. I'll put it at 220. And then that way it'll be easy to remember that this one needs to go to 220 as well. So now they're matching, and then right now I'm just going to eyeball that there's too few pixels on the right-hand side to keep this symmetrical. So I'll just move it over a couple of pixels and say that that's good. So I've got game over, a button that eventually will have reset, a button that eventually will have go home on there. And now I want to do some tweaking so that they're not always there when the game is playing. They're going to disappear when the game starts, and they're going to appear when the game over condition happens. So to do that, to save us some code, we're going to use something that we've used once before, which is a thing called families. Remember we made a family to make a couple things disappear at once? So I'm going to right-click on the families folder in the project tab here on the upper right. I'm going to choose Add Family. I'm going to add button home, button again, and HUD background. Click OK here, and it'll say it's family 1. I'm going to call it family HUD. Now, the only thing that stinks about families is I can't have objects of different types in families. So while I want the HUD to disappear with the game over text, because the game over text is text, I can't make it disappear in the same family. But I can get the other 3 in one. So what we're going to do is we're going to go over to our event sheet. We're going to find on start of layout. And on start of layout, we're going to add an action to the HUD, which is the little sprite icon with 4 green dots to show that it's a family, a collection, the same type of things. And the action we're going to add is set opacity, and we're going to set it to 0. So HUD will have its opacity set to 0 when the game starts. And then we have to do the same thing for text message. We'll do set opacity to 0. So now when the layout starts, that heads-up display and the game over message is going to say, it's going to be invisible. We won't be able to see it. Okay, now what we want to do on here, we added the is alive to the player fire. We added the is alive to the every tick. There. So in here, down towards the bottom, we need to deal with what's going to happen when things aren't alive. So when does is alive get set to 0? Is alive gets set to 0 if the player health equals 0. I want to make a change to this because in future versions of the game, what happens if you get hit by a boss and it takes away 2 or 3 or 4 of your health? So saying exactly equal to 0 could lead to future problems because you could have 2 health, lose 3, now you're at -1. Is the game going to stop? So you want to make it future-proof. So I'm going to edit this from last time and say as if the health is less than, I'm going to change it to less than 1. So if it's 0 or below. I could have changed that less than or equal to 0. I could have left it there. So the health text gets updated. We can't move anymore. Signs are inactive for the player. And then the one thing, enemies will still be spawning, but we'll deal with that in a little bit. So now we want to have an action that's going to say what else needs to happen when is alive is equal to 0. So we're going to ask the system, can you please compare the value of is alive and let us know when it's equal to 0? Because when it is equal to 0, we want the HUD background opacity to be back to 100. We want the text message opacity to be back to 100. So that way, if we test just this code right here, my health, we'll let the enemies take the health down a little bit. So game over, came up, popped up. All right, cool. Couple things I don't like. I don't like the enemy over the score, but we'll deal with that. And then I can't restart the layout yet because we haven't done that yet. But this worked, so that's good. Anyway, you got?
You could do when it's alive is equal to 0, enemies destroy all.
Ooh, so system is alive equal to 0, enemies, and there's a command called destroy all.
Oh, just destroy.
Destroy, and now the enemies are going to go away.
Yeah, that's what I did.
So we run that here. And then for testing purposes, I'm actually going to go here and on the player, I'm going to go instance variables. I'm going to set health to 1 because I don't want to wait for 5 hits for it to die. Yep, game over. That was too fast. So now if I run away, I can see my score is working, everything's working, enemies are spawning. Ooh, all the enemies got destroyed. That was pretty cool. You know what's even cool? You could do another thing in here. Another thing we've done before is system wait. So we can wait for like 1.5 seconds and then destroy them. So if I move those around like this, Eddie, if you do it like this, now it'll take a little bit for the game to catch up. So I'm playing. We'll see how long it takes till I get overwhelmed. That's kind of a cool effect. All right. So that would get rid of everything. The score would still be there. I'm going to start a layout. Did we set score back to 0? So there's a couple things we have to do on start of layout. Now that we have an is alive that's counting, a score that's counting, a player health that's counting. So I'm going to add an action here to on start of layout. And the action is going to be system set value is alive needs to go back to 1 on the start of layout. Score, so that's going to be system set value of score needs to go back to 0 so that your score doesn't keep adding up. Eventually, we're going to need a command for the player set instance value of HP back to 5. But because I want to test, I want him to pass away, I want the character to die right away, I'm just going to toggle this disabled, and I'll remember to enable it later. So now it'll start off with an HP of 1. Just quicker testing purposes. All right, so what else do we need to do inside here? We brought the text message up. We've done action, destroy enemy, destroy player, destroy projectiles. Oh, we could go through and take it a step further because Eddie, I think, was reading ahead in the directions. On is alive is 0. We can also action player, destroy, but that could happen like right away. And then we could destroy projectiles because we don't want the projectiles to keep moving. All right, so those will destroy the projectile, the player. That way you can't like cheat and get any more score. So we reset the score. We reset is alive. Then we made a tweak in period 2 to the spawn locations. This is going to be a little bit different, and it has to deal with instance variables. Did we give any instance variables to the enemy? Just sign movement. So we just gave it sign movement. I don't think we did anything with it yet. Oh, no, we did. We did the onCreated. OnCreated, so this will set sign to 0 or 1. And if it's 0, give it horizontal sign movement. If it's 1, give it vertical sign movement. We're going to add another instance variable by right-clicking on enemy, going to instance variables, and we're going to add spawn location. We'll leave it as a number 0. And what we're going to do here is on this enemy created, we're going to add another action to the enemy. And we're going to ask the enemy to set the value of spawn location to floor random 0, 8, or however many spawn locations you have. So 0 to 8 is going to cover my 8 locations. If you had 4 locations, 5 locations, you do 0 to 5 there. So now when the enemy is created, they're going to say spawn location needs to be 1, 2, 3, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, or 7. What we can do with that is when it's created, we can add some more subconditions. So we added subconditions Tuesday by clicking on here, and I'm going to say, or sub event, I'm going to press S on the keyboard. And it's adding a new event. This event is going to be for the enemy, and it's going to be called move. Event is going to be, compare. I can spell compare right. Compare instance variable. And the variable we're now looking at is the spawn location. So if the spawn location is 0, I want to add an action to the enemy, and this action is going to be called move to object. So no matter where it spawns, if it's 0, I'm going to have it move to another object, and the object I want it to spawn to is spawn location 0. Do you see what's going to happen here? I need 7 more of these for my 8 spawn locations. So right now I can go Control-C to copy. Paste is 2. Before I keep on going and doing more, I want to say this spawn location, we're going to see if it's equal to 1. And if it is equal to 1, we're going to move it to spawn location 1. Then I can keep on going with this copy and paste. So there's 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So I've got 8 locations. Here I'm going to say this one's got to be 2. We'll go replace object with spawn location 2. Double clicking to change this one to be 3. And then changing this spawn location to be spawn location 3. This one's going to be 4. You can see the pattern that's developing, so I'm just going to keep going without talking. Six becomes 6, moves to 6. This one's going to move to 7 when it's 7. So that's a lot of the same code. And one of the things you're going to see is that sometimes code like this can make it hard to find what you're looking for, because now there's a lot of things going on here. So I want to actually add what's called a group. And I want to group some things together. So if I add a group, it's going to ask me what name do I want to give it. I'm going to give this one spawn location as a group name. And I think it adds it at the end. Yeah, it added it at the end. So I've got to scroll down to the bottom, and I'm going to drag it up. And I'm going to put it right before this first spawn location. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold Control, and I'm going to click specifically this spot on each one of these. If I click somewhere else, I'll miss it. I want to click on this specific spot, this gray spot next to enemy on the line, so I can get all of them selected at once. Then I'm going to click and drag. Now all those things that are in spawn location, I can hide. I don't have to look at them every time I scroll through my code, because I know this is here and I know this is going to be working, and everything should be okay. There are a lot of times where you could find groups are going to be helpful. You could make groups for the enemy code, you could make groups for the setup, you could make groups for the player controls. So now what this is going to do, if I run the layout for this game, you're going to see it's going to look a little bit different. My health started out at 1. All right, so there was a little bit more variety in here because the enemies aren't all coming in 4 directions at a time. They're kind of coming in more randomly now, because even though they're spawned at a location, they come in somewhere else. So maybe having 4 of them come in now is too much. Maybe you could have a certain number of them come in and adjust. These are all values we can tweak later, but that just adds a little bit more variety into the game. So much so that we could probably take all 4 of these that are happening at spawn location 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, whatever. So this is basically saying 4 enemies are going to be spawned every 2 to 4 seconds, twice. We could cut this down and say, get rid of this odd even one. Get rid of these extra spawn location ones. And instead of having 1 every 2 to 4 seconds, now we could adjust the time and say we want 1 every 0.25 to, I don't know, 1.75, and see if that leaves us not as overwhelmed here. So this is starting off a little bit slower, but you could see that maybe as your score is going up, when I'm only getting them to spawn from 1. Let's see. I'm going to go back to my spawn location. Spawn enemy. Enemy uncreated. Did I give it spawn location? Floor random 0 to 8. Move enemy to spawn location. I don't know if it's working. It should be. I must be doing something wrong because it all seems to be coming from 0 now. And now they're all coming from 1 location. So I'm going to run a debug, and I'm going to see in debug what the value is of the enemies. So enemy instance variables. Oh, I lost it. Instance variable 6, so it's not moving to uncreated. Spawn another object. What if we change this action to system create object? Yeah, so I have to change it to system create object, and the object that's going to be created is enemy. The layer is going to be the player layer, and then the X is going to be spawn location 0.x. So we'll start them all at spawn location 0. Spawn location 0.y. I'm not even kidding. All right, so now let's see what this does. So now they're being created instead of spawned. They're still only coming in from there, even though they're being told to move to. Well, that's not working. I might go back to that other way, but it's spawning the enemy at spawn location 0. Do I have my things the right way? Enemy spawn location equals 0. So uncreated. We're setting spawn location to a random. And then we might have to see why it's not spawning at those locations. But regardless, let's see if I got through everything I wanted to get through here. I think don't make those changes I just made. Leave it back the way that it was. I'll figure out why this is only spawning at 1 spot. I'm doing something wrong and I'm just not seeing it right now. because it's treating everything as there. So right now your game should be working. Tomorrow we'll do the home logic of the reset button working, the start button working, and then the play again button working. So right now I'm going to stop. I'm going to see where people are and see where people need to be. So I'm going to end the stream here.